Hello and welcome to Nerdarchy. For nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerd Steve, and today I'm joined by Thilo Graf. How are you doing today?
I'm amazing. Thank you so much for having me, Dave. And kudos for properly pronouncing my name because I know the TH is a deadly trap for native speakers of English.
Well, I actually Googled the pronunciation first, and apparently there is a bunch of different ways to pronounce your name. So, and I also try to remember to ask so that I don't look like a jackass once we go live. Sometimes I succeed, sometimes I don't. But as always, folks, there are links in the description so you go check it out. And today we're going to be talking about Rūtmoork. Am I pronouncing that correct?
Well, if you want to pronounce it that way, sure, absolutely. Personally, I pronounce it Rultmoork, but that's because I'm a German, so
Yeah,
differences, obviously.
I'm not sure if my vocal cords quite do that. So, if you'd be so kind to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll kind of jump in.
Of course. My name's Thilo Graf. I've been with Dave before, talking about the Survival's Guide to Spelunking and Applied and Aggregate Spelunking. My last two books that we wrote with Doug Niles and Stephen Yeardley. And I'm now the editor-in-chief, lead developer, right-hand man of Jonathan G. Nelson for AW Games. And I've been working on our latest deluxe adventure box set, Rōdmark. And yeah, that one is the big project we have right now on Kickstarter. Yeah, so any detailed question I'll be happy to answer.
So, how long have you been working with AAW?
Oh boy, that's been ages. That has to be like 8 years or something like that. Back then, I was still primarily doing reviews and freelancing for pretty much everybody in the third-party circuit, so for Cobalt Press and so on and so forth. Since then, I've also published for Paizo and other big names. And at that point, I started, taking on some tasks for AW Games, and I slowly slid into, well, the position I'm in right now. So yeah, it's been a wild ride.
Nice. So, what is the current project? What is that about? I was a little while ago. I was checking out the Kickstarter video, which it's actually really cool the way it's done because it looks like the art style very much reminds me of almost like hieroglyphics on on a tomb wall or something.
Absolutely, absolutely. So Rōdmark is encapsulated by two grand concepts essentially. The first one is duality, and that is important on a narrative level. We'll get to that later, and on a structural level, and also regarding the rules. And the other one is wasteland archaeology, because what is amazing about exploring ruins, particularly in all those old school type of scenarios, old school games, and those classics like the city in the middle of the Lake of Glass and Desert of Desolation, for example. Um, what's so amazing about them is this sense of place that these locations have, right? And we wanted to evoke that with Rōdmark. So the thing you see first about Rōdmark is this wind-blasted, arid wasteland with those ochre mountain peaks in the distance. And from those mountains, from the steep passes, there is this thin, almost unearthly bridge, and there are bridges like that in real life, by the way, that reaches a spire, and the spire stands out from the get-go. You can see it for miles, and it is this white gray mottled rock, completely different from any of the other surroundings. It just looks out of place, weird, an anomaly, not just by this indication of civilization with this thin bridge leading up to the top of the spire, but also by the very rock that it is composed of. This is the spire of Rōdmark. It is considered to be accursed. these days. It is far off from the next town, easy to insert in pretty much all campaign settings. And well, this is the place that the adventurers get to explore. And if you've looked at the campaign video, you'll also see those gigantic glyph-covered golden doors. Those are actually one of the first things that the adventurers can potentially find. Because there are essentially two ways to start Rōdmark. Again, the duality angle. You can start from the top and check out this bridge and walk over the bridge to the top of the spire. Or if you're lucky, you'll see a gleam somewhere around the base. And if you follow this gleam, you'll reach those golden doors with all those weird runes. And upon closer examination, you'll notice that this metal has these blue flecks and seems to be made out of some unknown material. Those glyphs radiate strange magic, and they are actually Grekian, a lost language that we kind of developed for this entire adventure. And one of the tasks for the adventurers will be deciphering Grekian. And during playtests, we had this one group that just walked into this door, essentially, and they'd been playing for ages together, and super smart individuals, and they just sat down and broke the cipher for the runes on the door with the handouts provided without any further aid, and started Rultmoork in this particular way. So that's possible. The adventure does account for ridiculous amounts of player skill. For most other people, it'll be like, okay, this is weird. We should probably check up the top. So starting from the top might be the option that more parties will gravitate to. And there, among other things, the party can slowly, learn to decipher and decode Grekian. And if the players don't enjoy, deciphering weird squiggly runes and stuff like that on the copious handouts, no problem whatsoever, because one of the things I wanted to do as a developer was ensure that all kinds of different groups can engage with Rōdmark in a way that is fun for them. So if your group really detests puzzles like that and doesn't enjoy deciphering codes and things like that, well, no problem whatsoever. There are means to completely bypass this if you're smart once more, because this adventure, like many good ones, is all about player skill. It's not just character skill, but it's wasteland archaeology in that we endeavored really hard, and I think successfully, also from what we've heard from all the really enthusiastic player feedback from the playtests.
So I have a question. Was it one of the designers running the game when they cracked the cipher?
That was one of the designers. Yeah, that was one of Jonathan's parties.
Yeah.
Who managed to crack the cipher. But those guys, I've had the honor of playing with them, and oh boy, yeah, they are incredibly smart. And veterans, a couple of ex-military people, so they were like all over this and looked at it and were like, yeah, totally our jam. Whereas there's also the option to find all of that out and know how to, crack the cipher by role-playing properly. So if your group consists more of the people who, want to interact with certain individuals and stuff like that, that's also possible, because the ruins on top of the spire, those wind-blasted remains of the ancient Grekian fort there, they are inhabited by the Church of Still Waters, a really weird cult that is all about, water that does not move, that is stagnant, that has ceased to flow. Because, as their rationale goes, that water is actually more conducive to life than, fresh water flowing, because those flowing waters. They can smash you, they can break you, they can destroy whole cities, villages, and things like that. So there's also this duality between water states, between flow and stagnation going on, because the inside of this gigantic spire once housed the high temple of Vasi, goddess of fresh water and life-giving waters. And inside is the great Clepsydra, a gigantic dungeon-level sized water clock, one of the grand fantasy wonders of the world, lost to the mists of time and the fall of Grecia. So, yeah.
Is there a campaign setting that all of the AAW stuff kind of takes place in, or is it all freestanding?
We actually do have a campaign setting. It's called Aventyr, so Norwegian or for adventure, essentially. And it's freely available online on awgames.com. Everything you need to know about the setting is essentially this list of this huge list of different blog posts about different regions, different locations, and so on and so forth. And it's completely free. There is currently no campaign setting book that you put somewhere, because obviously we're still creating areas, we're still creating regions, and we're slowly fleshing out components, but we also wanted to keep our material plug and playable, if that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. I mean, like most of all of our stuff is kind of freestanding, and like we mentally, it's in the Nerdarchy verse someplace, but yeah, it's meant to be dropped in anywhere, and I feel like that's the sweet spot. It's
Yeah.
funny because when I see like huge Kickstarters for campaign settings, I'm like, are there really that many people just playing that one campaign setting? But I mean, maybe I don't know. Our group has always played homebrew stuff, so
Yep.
what is your role on this project?
So, well, I'm the math guy, essentially, and I've also acted as an editor, developer. I'm responsible for all the monsters that will try to kill and annihilate the party, because yes, of course, bestiary section, and not a single one of the monsters in the book is from the monster manual. We have all new creatures, and again, duality angle, there are creatures with different modes, because this archaeology aspect ties into the magic items that can be found. For example, flow tokens or stagnation tokens, crystallized water in different states that you can throw as a consumable, for example, at an enemy or at a trap or at some other feature of those dungeons, and interact with these respective components. So, for example, if this drooping spider-like elemental monstrosity out of slimy green water comes towards you and starts fighting the fighter, right? It bites him and everything becomes slow and sluggish, and he can't seem to be moving. Poison of inertia is infusing him. And then one of the party thinks, okay, let's change that up, and throws one of those flow tokens at the creature, and it changes. It enters flow mode, changes its shape, and gets a complete new ability array, a completely separate one. Its resistances and stuff like that do change in some way, yes, but what was really important to me was that, for example, regarding this spider-shaped elemental creature, they have a web. And in stagnation mode, this web, bogs you down and is kind of acidic and nasty. In flow mode, they can move you through the map, through the web at high speeds. Or another creature has this aura where it slows everything down around them with its inertia, with its stagnation. Yeah, in flow mode, it forces movement. So if the characters don't move around sufficiently in the vicinity of the creature, they feel the pressure and take damage. And particularly if you combine that with a lot of traps, and with traps that similarly interact and can be modified, things become rather interesting when you're forced to, for example, move.
So every monster is basically like a 2-for-1.
Not everyone, a couple of them,
Okay.
where it made sense, essentially.
Cool.
There are some instances where that didn't make sense, but I tried to do something interesting with all of them.
So
May I ask you a question?
you
Just
may.
a small one. I've mentioned those cultists. If you, in your game, have a group of cultists and a cult leader, do you use one stat block for all cultists, or do you prefer it if you have multiple ones?
So I guess like mooks would probably be the same, but maybe like the ones that are more important or have more leadership roles, those might be different depending. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So, cult stat blocks. You have the cultist stat block, and if you prefer one stat block for all the mooks, perfect, fine. If you want a little bit more difference, or if you want to customize those cultists for your gaming group, no problem whatsoever, because I have the cultist customizer. So
Nice.
next to the stat block, you have those modifications for different types of cultists. So if you, for example, have this adventuring group that starts every encounter with a large group of enemies with, fireball, flaming ball, ice storm, and so on. So they throw their battle magic there and then, sweep up the remains. Then you can spontaneously, as a GM, choose to make out of, I don't know, 17 cultists, 12 or even all 17 dexterous cultists, which nets them a higher dex value, which also influences attacks, of course, but it also nets them, for example, evasion, which makes all those insta-kill mook sweeper spells based on dexterity, obviously, somewhat less useful. Or if you have single target moshers, like, I don't know, once I had a party with 3 barbarians and all, built and geared towards damage.
Yeah.
So if you need if you need tougher cultists with more HP to soak, no problem whatsoever. You choose an array of tough cultists, or you mix everything up. So that's just another example.
That makes a lot of sense too, especially because that would just be a useful tool for GMs in general. Because if you're, different cults would probably draw different people to them. If you had a cult based off of something that's more primal and savage, you would think you're gonna get more tougher ruffian, rustic types that might be different than the a cult is based more on free thinking and higher education. It doesn't make sense for them all to be the same.
Yep.
Brian Smith wants to know, what's your favorite unique creature design from Rultmoork, and the gooier the better.
Okay. So um at one point, Jonathan made this call and asked me to design from the ground up 2 additional bosses as one of the playtesting feedback results. And that's what I did. And those 2 bosses I'll call the Watcher and the Listener. And you might encounter them in a way where you hear this rasping voice that's like, I can see you, or I can hear you. And when you see them, they're actually nightmare fuel. I'm not spoiling how they look, because if I talk about it, because they're actually in the Kickstarter video, unless I'm sorely mistaken. So the Watcher is this emaciated thing that looks like a broken doll with the flesh cracked at the seams, at all of the, at for example the elbow, at the shoulder, and so on and so forth. And the tips of the fingers have split up, and in those fingers are small weird eyeballs instead of the fingertips. And instead of a head, the head has kind of detonated from the inside out, and huge optical nerves rise from the inside of the hollowed out body, ending in those ginormous, huge, weird eyeballs with a kind of white yang symbol inside them. And those two, particularly if you encounter them in conjunction with each other, are incredibly deadly and really, really nasty. The Watcher also has this crackling electricity around it, because obviously these grotesque optical nerves have hollowed out the entire body, and there's electricity coursing through them. So yeah, I love them.
So one of the things I keep meaning to bring up is the fact that it actually comes in a box. It's a box set.
Yes, absolutely. So I actually championed a box set during our meetings, because I love box sets. I'm a
The first Kickstarter I ever backed was because it was a box set, and over my shoulder there's just the top corner of it, it's backwards, poking out Death and Taxes from Lesser Gnome.
Just give me a sec.
Also a Lesser Gnome fan. And that was how and that's kind of how I had met Zach Glazer from Frog God Games. That was the first thing I saw, and I was like, oh, that just struck me because of the nostalgia and the fact that I hadn't seen a box set in decades at that point, I think. And they just don't make them anymore. What I heard is stores don't like carrying them, and I don't know if that's true or not, but it used to be like everything came in a box set.
Yeah, but it's so curious that you mentioned Death in Texas, because it's such a phenomenal set, and it was actually one of my inspirations for, I want Rōdmark to be a box set as well.
Yeah,
because it's also this internally very consistent environment with a very unique setup, and there has been so much thought going into every aspect of this project. We've been working on this thing, and I'm not even kidding you, for 3 years. So I was like, no way, this is just going to be a hardcover. I want everything. I want dice. I want counters for flow and stagnation for the GM. I want whatever we can have, and we actually even have I think 3.5 hours of soundtrack. We have dynamic dungeons, moving battle maps.
Animated VTT maps. Yeah, I saw that.
And a ton of handouts. And by the way, regarding handouts and art direction, it's one of the things I'm also super happy with when it comes to Rōdmark, because while I love cool, iconic characters, used time and again in artworks, I don't particularly like them for adventures, because in adventures, seeing, for example, Emery from Paizo, or one of the other iconics, right in the middle of this battle, kind of brings me out of it a little bit, because it's not my party, it's not my hero who's fighting this monster. And so we have a ton of artwork and handouts that show what the adventurers are seeing, and the artwork actually contains hints. So it kind of rewards once more the players engaging with the environment. Not just walking through ruins, but really trying to understand what has happened here. We have murals, actual art representations of ancient murals with a completely different art style from any other pieces of art in the adventure. And those murals contain hints that help the adventurers really big time if they pay attention, if
Is
they
that
interpret
is
correctly
that
and
what the
stuff.
video is based off of?
Yeah, a couple of those murals are featured in the video. Yeah,
Yeah, it looks
exactly.
it definitely looks really cool because like you said, the murals, and then I believe they animated them to make it look super cool and kind of authentic and give you that like, oh, I'm in a tomb in Egypt kind of feel.
Yeah.
Um, Now, when you're playing, are you mostly a GM or a player or both? Do you have a preference?
So it honestly depends on the system because I am pretty OCD. So if you give me a rules heavy game like Pathfinder 5e or Pathfinder Second Edition, or well for DCC it's borderline, but it's already kind of critical there. So the in the rules intense systems, I tend to have this developers and this designers issue where I'm like, that's not how this creature works. That's
Yeah,
not how this ability works. That should have worked. And
if you're a
you know,
player.
if I'm a player, so
Okay.
for those games, I try to GM.
Uh,
What I really enjoy playing is playing as a player. Is more rules light games like well OSR games, BX, that sort of stuff, and things like for example Best Left Buried, Traveler, even though curiously Traveler is not exactly rules light, but
no.
it doesn't. It does not trigger
Okay.
this weird mental response from me, which is kind of curious. And I also really enjoy playing Call of Cthulhu and similar horror games, Gumshoe. So I really enjoy playing as a player in more rules light games
Uh,
where my rules OCD is not triggered by the GM winging it or making a GM call that I wouldn't agree with, and so on and so forth. But yeah.
Also, just a casual observation. It seems like uh, less fantasy as far as being a player.
Not necessarily, because when I play, for example, Swords and Wizardry or Old School Essentials,
Oh yeah,
some of
that's
those
true.
old school games, I actually go for fantasy. So uh, it's mainly the this weird response in my brain,
Yeah.
I don't know.
No, it's perfectly fine. What are you playing nowadays?
So nowadays I play D&D 5e, Pathfinder First Edition, because a couple of my players are really into those hyper complex combat simulations. I also, well, I'm not consistently playing Starfinder and Pathfinder 2 right now. I'm doing a couple of OSR one shots and DCC games, but we kind of alternate essentially. But the big ones are right now 5e and PF1.
Have you checked out Morkborg?
Uh, a Merkborg, yeah. I have tried Merkborg. Um, I like a lot of it. I like a couple of other things more. Let me take a look if I have it lying around here. Yeah. I actually prefer Utmocheren. The first of those Ultra Rules Light games that Occult Erdmestere games and Stockholm Cartel did together way back when. A little bit over Merkborg for a variety of reasons, but that's only available in Swedish right now, as far as I know. So
That would be a challenge for some of us.
yeah, yeah.
No, that is awesome. Right now, are you do you have regular games that you're running or playing in?
Yeah, as noted, 5e, Pathfinder, mostly homebrewed
Are they? Yeah. Are you
stuff.
GMing those or playing? Just GMing?
Jamming.
Yeah.
I primarily GM these days. I don't get to have as much time as I used to when I was still studying, so um, mostly GMing it is for me.
Yeah. We mix it up by having like a lot of monthly games. They're like regular games that we play once a month.
Yeah.
Is kind of is what has worked for us. Um, so I had a question and it just fell right out of my head. but so, as a designer, what is your favorite things to work on?
That's super difficult because one of the issues I have with being a designer is I have this latent streak of perfectionism, and for most of the components I at one point look back on them and think like, "Ah, yeah, I could have done that better, and if I only had like far more pages for this aspect and stuff like that." Difficult to say. I I derive most satisfaction from taking something that has the seed of greatness and
Mm.
polishing it up to a shine, regardless of what it is. When it comes to my own designs, I think I really love it when I have a grand plot, a grand scheme of things, and it all comes together. And I have this not really world building, but plot web constructed, and then it just fits seamlessly together, and I'm like, yes.
It sounds a lot like adventure design.
Yeah. But then again, the book I'm most proud of right now is The Survivalist's Guide to Spelunking, and that thing is essentially rules, and even more rules. So
Yeah, well, that one you guys got to work with Douglas Niles on, right?
yes, yes,
Which is pretty cool.
uh, I was starstruck pretty much all the time.
Yeah. It is. It is. I will say it is weird meeting people like that when you've like spent maybe decades reading their stuff, their works, and then and then meeting them. When we got to talk to them on here, that was really cool. I've gotten to talk to R.A. Salvatore. I've gotten to talk to Richard Knack. Which was like I think, and Richard Knack, I think like his were some of the first books I read that weren't actually like D&D novels. So that was kind of special and exciting for me.
Yeah,
Um,
totally get it.
so what are you guys working on next after this project?
So right now we're obviously still in the Rōdmark phase, and after that I have a special project coming up. One where Jonathan gave me creative control. I think for the first time for such a big project, and that would be Rise of the Drow after the Fall. Um, May I give you a brief rundown?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we're here for. Let's talk.
All right. So, we assume that all the things in Rise of the Drow, our best-selling book, happened pretty much with a resounding success of the heroes. So, the first house of the Drow was crushed. They were defeated, much like from the Drizzt novels. When House Bainray falls, what happens? Power vacuum, chaos, assassinations, civil warish angles. In Hodoth, we call that the most civil war, because the Drow have been through this entire spiel a couple of times. It's part of their cycle. It's something that happens time and again. First house rises, unites the Drow, emerges, goes on this conquest, enslaves, kills, destroys other cities, and then at one point they're beaten, have to fall back, and so on and so forth, and the cycle repeats. So they knew how to handle that. What they did not expect was the Grand Matron, the champion of Naraneos, the queen of poison and shadow, the deity of the Drow. This chosen escaped to the demiplane of Venom. And there she turned into what I call her Sephiroth form, essentially. So the Eclipse Angel. On the demiplane of Venom, supported by the legions of Naraneos. The adventurers still beat her. Naraneos was not happy. She was like, yeah, okay. And like, for example, since you mentioned it in the Drow War series, the Queen of Poison and Shadow wasn't too happy and removed her spider temple from Holoth. The temple just got up and walked out of the city. That was an indicator for the Drows. Oh, something went horribly wrong here.
Yeah, I would say so.
Then things got worse. Tolborough Tower, the power center of the first house, imploded at the end of Rise of the Drow. In this wasteland, suddenly the ground started bubbling. It started cracking. And the demiplane of Venom, an entire plane of poisonous toxins and materials started bubbling up. That was known as the Hour of Venom, and it happened all over the underworld, but particularly badly in the middle of Holoth. So they have kind of a little bit like mutative, poisonous Chernobyl-like situation going on in the middle of their metropolis and center of power, right after a civil war.
I hate when that happens.
Yeah. And then there was this other pesky thing. Those adventurers from the surface, they made a lot of friends down there. You know, different dwarves, like the hardliners from Stoneholm, the dwarves from Ambla, and all those trading people, where Ambla used to be, you know, the sacred place. The Drow had actually kind of tried to destroy the entire city. That ruffled a couple of feathers. Including those of, for example, Svirfneblin, Colliator, all those weird races that we have in the underworld, the Sonar using the Stradi, the many-armed Hoyrol, and so on. And something unprecedented happened. Inspired by those good adventurers from the surface, all those races came together and were like, we've been doing this for how many thousands of years? Your great grandmaster remembers the last time the Drow raided and destroyed us and destroyed everything, right? And then everyone was like, yeah, that needs to stop. And they formed a coalition. They pooled their magic, all their special abilities, you know, dwarven rune magic, sonar-based abilities, the ability to fly over things, blood control and stuff like that. Fungal bioengineering. And they formed an army and marched on Holoth. Holoth was weakened. Then the coalition came. They defeated the Drow, resoundingly. 2.5 years have passed since Holoth has fallen and is now known under the wonderful name of Hopeholm, because the coalition are the good guys, and they want to make the Drow good neighbors and a productive member of the underworld trading community. They really want to liberate the Drow from their insane theocracy, their elitism, their sexism, their racism, and all of the other isms that decadent and gorgeous Drow culture is. Yeah, guess what? You're Drow. All of you are Drow. Everyone is playing a Drow from one of the houses of Holoth. And that means you get unique house-based abilities that will improve as you level throughout the campaign, provided you do the right things, of course. And you have a very good reason to work together, because man, those coalition guys, they are actually pretty darn capable and successful. So, Rise of the Drow After the Fall is all about being Drow, being evil, and being smart and devious. Because Drow need to be smart to claw their way back to supremacy. Because the Coalition, oh boy, they know what they're doing.
So this is an adventure written for an evil party.
Yeah.
I don't think you've seen many of those.
Yeah. Evil, all Drow, and unique mechanics for each and every one of the Drow houses. With abilities like controlling shadow, bloodweave magic, instant mastery, battle theory, where you can just analyze your enemy with your mind and then, help combat that foe, a little bit like Guy Ritchie, Sherlock Holmes.
Nice.
That sort of stuff will be part of the house abilities.
Yeah, so Red Jack wants to know, we're going to see Drow mutants, Brian Smith. What about the flumps?
There will at one time be flumps. Yes. Not in this particular. Although
I don't know that we can't call them flumps, though, can we?
Yeah. I think they're WotC IP.
Yeah, I believe so too.
But mutation. Oh yes, there will be mutants. Of course, the venom that's coursing up is a super great energy source. There will be ways of using venom in a variety of ways, including for specific weapons and items and things like that. There will also be grotesque mutations and some tasks where the Drow have to venture into areas that are not that conducive to their health. And if you've read my Driders of the Underworld booklet, you'll know that I am really fond of twisted, mutating things.
Yeah, how can you not be fans of the twisted mutating things?
Exactly.
For sure. I know what I wanted to ask you before that I completely forgot. Are you playing online or off? Or both?
Yeah, so I used to exclusively play offline. So old school, this little chaos right there behind me is actually my gaming table, which is consistently buried under this huge pile of books, dice, and paraphernalia I need for gaming. But the sad matter of the fact is that with COVID and people having kids and stuff like that, we play mostly online these days. Yeah.
Yeah, COVID's bad, but kids, that really wrecks things.
Well, it's supposed to be amazing. I can't say anything about that, unfortunately.
My youngest has just turned 18, so I've got a little bit of experience there. It's okay. But yeah, so we tend to play. We've got games online and offline. And I think like many of us, we prefer getting together, but there's something nice about meeting up with friends that you otherwise wouldn't be able to game with.
Yep.
So
100%. That was also super important to me and to Jonathan during the whole Rōdmark campaign, was that we can support all of the VTTs, that all of the PDFs will be up to our high standards, just like the physical artifacts are.
Some are better. I mean, you can't make digital animated physical maps, right? But you can do them digitally, which is kind of cool. So it's really about figuring out how to play to the strengths of the medium you're in. Do you use VTTs, Theater to the Mind?
Depends on the game. For complex rules games, I tend to use Fantasy Grounds, or Foundry, or Roll20, once again, depending on the rule set. For for rules light games, I tend to prefer just, having either a Discord or a Sky chat open and, sharing parts of my screen where you can see the map and stuff like that, and I squiggle things and go for a theater of the mind, because the first 3 campaigns I ran were all pure theater of the mind. So
yeah. I mean, we do a weekly stream game that's theater of the mind, no matter what system we use, whether it's D&D, our own system we're making up, or Cypher system or whatever. But I've also played Roll20 and stuff like, and Fantasy Grounds. I guess like even when I play in person, I don't use a lot of like terrain and minis. It's all mostly theater of the mind, and then like though if there's like a more complicated scene, we might put out some minis and stuff in order for people that want to be more tactical. Also, I find like my group of players tend to like doing terrain and minis, so even if I don't pull it out, they will. Like they start setting up the combat whether I wanted it to be set up or not. So
one of my players is this incredibly hardcore old school Warhammer nerd. He's super into minis, and he obsessively paints them, which I would never be able to. And yeah, we are never hungry or starving for minis.
Yeah. Red Jackal wants to know if you've ever played the old World of Darkness Theater of the Mind system. Well, I mean, that was all basically designed for Theater of the Mind.
Yes. As a goth,
you have a certain aesthetic to you. I'm just noticing.
As a goth slash metalhead who grew up in the 90s in Germany, yes, I played the old World of Darkness. So and really the old World of Darkness. So Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf Apocalypse. The last thing in that vein that I played were the Orpheus books, which I immensely enjoyed because I was also super fond of Wraith. But yeah, there were cons. There was a lot of socializing and getting to know people. So yeah, old World of Darkness, totally mine. I have to. Sorry.
We made a couple attempted forays, never stuck with our group. I would say like the biggest thing about the World of Darkness for us was like we loved this huge expansive world, but hated the fact that the game systems segmented it off from each other. So like maybe just because we played too much D&D and we want to mix all the things together, and we tried doing it, and it's kind of insane and doesn't work very well.
Yeah, that was particularly true when you tried to mix vampire with changeling back then. That really did not work well.
We had mixed vampire and werewolf and mage.
Nice.
So, the world was sure to be destroyed.
Yeah. My personal pet peeve about World of Darkness was often that there was usually more reasons for the players to try to kill each other than to work together. And as a GM, at one point, I just ran out of steam coming up with the reasons why those vampires from different clans, why those werewolves from different tribes, and so on and so forth, actually should work together, except the prince said so, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, does make it difficult. What game did you cut your teeth with? What was your first game?
My first game period, or first role-playing game?
First role-playing game.
Okay, first role-playing game was actually AD&D first edition box set in its German translation back when I was a wee kid, because at that point I kind of grew tired of Warhammer and of Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, so the first game I actually ever played was Gamma World, the original Gamma World, and I played like a session, and then wouldn't touch D&D for like another 4 or 5 years, and then we started with first edition. And it's really distinctive, like because I can remember it was first edition AD&D, but the second printing, because you have the 3 iconic for 1E books, and then you have the second printing which was all different art, and also those books fell apart.
Yeah.
So it's like your player's handbook, you can just pull out whatever section you want it, pass it around. Matter of fact, like when 5e came out, the bindings were so bad, the books fell apart, and it's like, oh, they really are trying to give us that old school feel.
Yeah. I can guarantee you one thing: AAW Games books are not going to fall apart, and even if they are like consumed in a house fire or something like that, we actually do replace them. And yes, Jonathan actually does that. We have this one person whose house actually partially burned down, and he showed us a picture of this horribly smoldered book that was barely perceptible as one of ours, and we just sent them a fresh copy because it's bad enough when your house starts burning down. It's even worse when you also kind of lose part of your gaming library and have to purchase everything again. So
yeah, that is definitely rough. And it also feels like more and more of the world is on fire. So that's a really good policy to have for people that are buying their books.
Yeah. Plus, also, by the way, one of the reasons why I keep working with AW Games and why I'm working with them right now as part of the company is just because we kind of try to do this thing right and treat people like we'd want to be treated.
Yeah.
And I've had a couple of experiences with different RPG content creators and different publishers where I'm just saying, yeah, okay, that was definitely the last book I've purchased from that particular entity, and we never want to be that person or that creator or something like that. So we really try to do right by our supporters and fans and everyone,
Yeah, I mean, customer service is really important, and trying to keep the customers happy. As long as they're reasonable. Some customers aren't worth keeping, but most people are decent enough. I know Ted had spent a ton of money with a company and had a bad experience, and now they're forever in the book of grudges. So he had like placed a big order on their site and backed a big Kickstarter with a bunch of money, and the customer service was just so terrible. And he's just like turned off to them for life.
Yeah.
So treat people well, especially your customers.
Yep.
Because without our customers, our community, our audiences, we have nothing.
Yeah, without all of you guys out there, we're essentially nothing. We're just people screaming into the void, trying to share our stories. So, yeah.
So AAW had a decent presence at Gen Con this year. Or they had some Drow running around, running their booth.
Oh yeah, they actually flew me in from Germany, which was absolutely amazing, and the Drow and Jonathan got to present Rise of the Drow, completely signed from everyone who worked on that book, to R.A. Salvatore as a grand offering.
I believe I saw that video, and he's such a cool dude to talk to. He's so down to earth.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also, it's just funny to hear anybody with a Boston accent talk about fantasy stuff. So he should voice all of his own books because it would just be hilarious.
Yeah. So yeah, Gen Con was absolutely amazing. I had such a blast there. I mean, at the end, I had no more voice left. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, that
from
does
from
happen.
from talking all day long and stuff like running games and talking
Was
to
that your
people.
first Gen Con, or had you been to Gen Con before?
It was my second Gen Con. I've
Okay.
been before, I think, 2015 as when I was, or even no, that was even sooner. It's been ages. Back when I was still primarily doing RPG reviews.
Okay.
A couple of people just supporters, publishers and stuff like that just threw a bunch of threw up a GoFundMe without me really realizing they would, and just collected a bit of money and sent it my way, and like, you're coming to Gen Con, and I'm like,
Oh, that was pretty cool.
well, it was this unprecedented level of kindness and support, and it was just amazing because I'd spent like thousands of hours, and I'm not even exaggerating, just writing reviews, publishing them, and so on and so forth. And that 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 experience to me was kind of like Christmas and birthday on the same
Uh,
day. And particularly because I got to actually meet all those amazing people I had been talking to online, and whose books I had been reading uh, in person, and have them sign books, meet people like Monty Cook and Wolfgang Bauer and Laura Gresta and Eric Mona and so on and so forth. So absolutely
what is the
amazing.
big con in Germany?
It's Spiel.
Spiel.
Yeah.
And then there's Dragon Meat in the UK, right?
Yeah, exactly. But essentially, like in many other instances, for most Americans, Spiel would probably be considered to be kind of quaint in comparison to Gen Con
Well, I mean,
regarding
Gen
the
Con's not a
size.
fair comparison for anything because so Origins was my first convention, which is a really big convention, and it happens like a month or two before Gen Con. And then I went to Origins, and then I went to Gen Con 50, which just was huge anyway. And like compared to Origins, it completely eclipsed it. And Origins is super big. And then I went to PAX Unplugged, and it was the first year for PAX Unplugged. Now, my business partner Ted, he's been to a lot more conventions to me, but they're all small conventions, local conventions, and like the biggest one he had been to at that point was probably the Steampunk World Fair, and it was like 4 hotels. And so when he went to PAX Unplugged, he was like, oh man, this is so big. But at this point, PAX Unplugged had kind of been like the smallest convention I'd been to. And because like you could have fit that into Origins several times over, and then you could have fit Origins into Gen Con a couple times over. So like comparing anything to Gen Con is just not
Yeah,
fair.
yeah, absolutely.
Because and the whole city turns out. Um, but yeah, but although PAX Unplugged has grown up quite a bit over the last few years, and for us right now, it's kind of our local convention, so it's kind of nice. Like, we film like 10-15 minutes from Philadelphia where they have it. So
Nice, nice.
yeah. So we are at that time. Final thoughts before we head on out.
Oh yeah, I have some news to share regarding Rōdmark.
Okay, it is.
We've been talking about us listening to our fans. Also, by the way, on Discord, if you join the AEW Games Discord, you can just talk to me or Jonathan or whoever. We have a great community. Anyhow, our fans asked for it. We'll deliver. There'll be a retailer pledge for Rultmoork, obviously, and the cool limited edition hardcover version by Seattle-based artist Nat Dam will be, in spite of what we had figured out previously, there will be a way to combine the box set with the limited edition hardcover by Nat Dam, because that was super complex to set up and
Yeah.
ultra problematic, but we after much finagling, we found a way. So you'll be able to get just the box set with the limited edition hardcover, and if you don't just want 2 books. Personally, I'll just use the regular edition of Rultmoork for running games, and the limited edition as a collector's item. But that's just me. I'm peculiar when it comes to that sort of stuff. Uh, so those are the 2 grand news regarding Rōdmark. Please support us. You won't regret it. The module is friggin' amazing. And I'm not just saying that because I worked on it, but because I really believe it. I mean, have you taken a look at the Lich Lady?
And it has 4 walls. The links are all in the description, so you can check them out. Check out AAW, track them across the interwebs in the good way, not the creepy way. Thanks for being on, Thilo, and until next time, stay nerdy.
Thank you.